speaker of the night is Geeta Chopra, and she is the Retail Innovation Manager at Johnson & Johnson. It's a pretty cool and unique title. But she also has 3 fun facts that you probably don't know about Geeta. So Geeta seriously considered getting a Jamiroquai's tattoo when she was 16.
Jamiroquai.
Okay, I knew I was going to fuck that
They're
up.
a very established British funk band.
That is a British funk band. And no, she did not get that tattoo.
A little bit of regret, though.
She was born with a tooth. And she likes to be the first to clap after a good show or presentation. Awesome. Geeta, come on up here and share your fuck up.
All right. I got this. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Wow, I am so excited to be here, and admittedly a little terrified to be sharing this story, because as I was reflecting on it for tonight, I realized just how many fuck-ups there were in this big fuck-up story. And I got a little scared, but I'm really excited to share it. So please be courageous with me. So my name is Geeta. I work in retail innovation. And I wanted to start by first telling you a little bit about myself. So before this, I worked at Procter & Gamble, another big behemoth CPG. And the following photo describes how I felt working at P&G. One of these things is not like the other. I felt super surprised that I ended up there, and honestly a little bit shocked as to why. My background is actually in advertising. I'm a strategist for a number of years. I'm an advertising girl through and through. And after that, I worked in tech. I was actually in an accelerator in Toronto for a number of years. And so I sort of stumbled into CPG. And although I loved it, and honestly it taught me so much, I also started to feel like, my creative juices just weren't being met, and I had all these great ideas of how to do business and how to do work and how to partner with retailers, and there wasn't really an avenue for them. So I decided to look somewhere else, and I thought, I'm not going to do CPG. I'm going to go back to tech or maybe work for a startup. And then I stumbled upon this role on LinkedIn, and it honestly seemed like the perfect job. It was a mix of all the things that I'd done and that I could do. It was a mix of understanding tech, it was a mix of understanding retail, and it was a mix of design thinking. And so I thought, oh gosh, I really got to get this job. And so I fought really hard for it, and I got it. But what I found out after I got this job was that it was globally unique, meaning no one else in the world, in the J&J network, has this job. And because of that, there are a lot of eyes on what I'm doing, what I'm producing, the results I'm bringing in, and ultimately the value that I have for the company. In a sense, I'm sort of like a pilot. And if my role is successful, then there could be openings for multiple roles across the globe in this giant multinational company. Cool. Yeah, I can definitely do that. I can handle that pressure. So, new in the role, I knew a couple things. I knew that I could do it, but I also knew that I needed a win on the board. I needed a project that was really going to kind of catapult me into stardom and really kind of get my role valued. And so this is actually the board. And I needed a win on this board of all the projects that I was working on. And so I decided that the model that I was going to use to flesh out this new role and this unique role was this. It was perfect. I would find cool startups in Toronto doing awesome work, partner with them, develop an MVP or proof of concept in our lab, and then pitch that MVP to a retailer that we had an established relationship with. It was foolproof. They would have to accept this amazing MVP and scale it. So I decided, okay, this is an awesome model. This is good. But what should I solve for? So I decided to solve for this. When you are shopping, as consumers, you must know, it is so damn confusing. Like, what do you buy? And especially when you're sick or when you're in pain, which is the products that we specialize in, that's when you're really sort of overwhelmed. Like, what the heck do I buy? Like, which version? What color? What price? So I decided this was a great problem statement. How might we make shopping easier? And so I thought, okay, that's a good problem statement. Now I just need a startup. And I sort of, asked internally. I was new, so I didn't know what relationships already were established. And I learned that someone had a relationship with an augmented reality company. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is it. We're going to use augmented reality, and we are going to light up the shelf based on what you need. So imagine you input, my back hurts, products on the shelf would come to life that were related to back pain. So I thought this was a great model. So I'm really excited. I meet this startup, and this was my first fuck up. I didn't assess them at all. I didn't really ask them any questions. I was sort of excited for them to tell me and ask me questions. And I really relied on that established relationship versus maybe asking a couple of things like, who have you already worked with? Or, what kind of roadmap do you have? Or how much funding do you have? Who's on your advisory committee? So going sort of on faith, we have our first kickoff meeting. I'm so excited, and I say, okay, here's my problem. And they go, awesome. It's going to take 4 weeks for an MVP, minimum viable product. And I go, oh, it's 4 weeks. Wow, picked a good one. This is going to be great. Now, part of me knew that that was too fast, but part of me wanted so badly for a win on the board that I accepted that. And I was like, yep, let's go for it. Let's do this. So a month goes by, no MVP is delivered. 2 months go by, no MVP is delivered. 3 months go by, and no MVP is delivered. But you know what we have done a lot of? Meetings, meetups, lunches, coffees. So here's what I'm going to tell you. There's always a balance and a dichotomy between project management and relationship management. And I went too far one way. I was so invested in the relationship with the startup, with making them like us, with making them trust us, with them meeting our president. They ended up being on a first-name basis that I excused the missing of these deadlines. And I excused the behavior, ultimately, which was kind of unprofessional to not deliver. So that was my second fuck up. 4 months go by. 5 months go by. Now I'm getting questions, again, from global senior leaders. And luckily in big companies, you can kind of say like, I mean, you know how it is, it takes a while, it's a lot of swirl happening. And that's actually something that happened. So I was sort of hiding behind our side. I'm like, it's caught up in legal. Things are happening. But that was not true. That was poor legal, I'm sorry. I'm used. So final red flag was the developer that I was working with for 5 months. I saw posted that he got a new job on LinkedIn. The weirdest part was I almost congratulated him. I was like, hey, good for you. Wait, didn't I just email you yesterday? So I called the startup. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they were like, oh, he wasn't a good cultural fit. It's fine. It's actually better for us. We can work faster. He was actually hindering the project. We're going to get this done. And I was like, awesome, cool. But this is when I really honestly started to panic. And the worst, I think, is this. We paid them in advance. Now, not fully. I paid them kind of milestone payments, and I'd set them up in our system, which is automated because we're a big company. And I had expected a 4-week deadline, right? So I had set them up for an 8-week, which I thought was, being very risk-averse, 8-week payment plan. So they ended up getting paid for half the work at 8 weeks. And I was 6 months in. I'd obviously stalled all of their payments, but at this point, I have now paid them. So I'm now invested in getting a frickin' deliverable, right? Like, I don't want this project to end. Give me something. There's money at stake now. 6 months go by, 7 months go by. And at this point, I now realize that I have to swallow my pride and do the very responsible thing, which is talk to legal. And that is the shittiest thing to ever do, is to set up a meeting with legal and say, hey, I got to break up with somebody, and I don't know how to do it, and I'm really scared. And I picked the wrong partner. And it's you really need a good team behind you. And luckily at J&J, honestly, they were so supportive, and they got it. They're like, you know what, Geeta, we get it, and we're not going to make this more complicated. We're just going to have an amicable breakup. And that's what we did. I had to have a really tough conversation with the startup, who I actually really liked. We were friends at this point, and break up with them. So after that, after the amicable breakup and explaining to leadership what happened, I kind of had a bit of a moment where I thought, okay, well, that is the end of me. Guess I am going to startup, because there's no more room for me here. And the most amazing thing happened. A couple weeks later, my manager sat me down and said, all right, what's your new model? And I stared back at him and I was like, what? And he was like, what's your new model? That model didn't work. What do you want to do now? And it was this moment of sort of being able to have the flexibility to completely recreate this role. So we actually had like a brainstorm where he asked me what went wrong. Okay, what went wrong? What did you learn? What went wrong? And I literally listed everything that I learned and everything that went wrong and how I would do it differently and how I would design this role now, knowing what I know. And he was like, awesome, go do it. Go do it. And so I did. I redesigned the role. And honestly, the ingredients are the same, but the relationships are different. I have now decided to maybe first start asking retailers, what do you want to solve for? What's on your mind? What keeps you up at night? And in fact, they are a willing participant. Surprisingly, not everyone asks them that. Everyone is trying to sell them something. And so all of a sudden, these retailers who we consider, our proud clients are telling me what's keeping them up at night and saying, hey, I would love to solve for this. You know what, this is something that we'd love to do. We just don't have the time, we don't know how to do it. And so I'm so happy to announce that since that time, we have 3 active proof of concepts live. We have 1 that has results in that have surpassed benchmarks by 3 times, so 300%, and is being looked to scale globally with a major world retailer that I can't name. And what's great is that startups are still a part of this pie. They're an ingredient. At the end of the day, we can't do everything, but once I validate and understand what we need to solve for, I now know how to look for the right startups. And in fact, we're partnering with 2 startups that live right here at 111, and we're supporting local. So it's been a really interesting whirlwind of an experience, so I just wanted to share some key takeaways. The first, show your work. You might get part marks. And this is really true, if you remember from math class. So one of the reasons I honestly think that I wasn't let go, 1, J&J's an awesome company, but 2, I tracked everything. I used a project management software from the moment that I decided on that startup. Every conversation was tracked, every email, every attachment, every verbatim. I tracked every commitment that was missed and why. I tracked every deliverable that wasn't given and how long it would extend the project. And so whenever anyone asked me, Geeta, what's happening? It's 6 months. I'd go, well, so glad you asked that. Actually, in March 2020, this happened, and in February, this happened. And it became less about emotion and more about facts. But I had all the data ready at my fingertips. So I sort of showed the work in progress, and it kind of gave me part marks, and it allowed me to fail in a safe way. And then the final piece of feedback would be, and this is, you've heard this a million times, but I can't stress it enough, trust your gut. At that first meeting that I had with this startup, when they told me, yeah, we can deliver it in 4 weeks, my gut was like, no, you can't. What? No. What? Isn't there QA or something? I knew at that moment that this was too good to be true. But I ignored my gut. And so what I would tell you all is listen to your gut. It is wise. It knows more than you do. It knows more than your brain does. And if anything, it is powerful. So I will leave you with my favorite quote, which is from Marianne Williamson, and it is, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Thank you.
Geeta, thank you so much for sharing that story. And you had such relatable lessons there. I had a similar experience while I was working at a retail tech startup where I sort of partnered with somebody and overpromised and then it didn't happen, but I was not as diligent as you were in tracking it, and later I actually did get fired from that job. But it wasn't because of that, it was a whole thing, but I have my fair share of fuck-ups too. But thank you so much for sharing your story and those powerful lessons. Let's open it up to some Q&A for Geeta, and we're gonna have a couple mic runners from the team. Does anybody from the volunteer team wanna help me out? And when you ask your question, make sure that the question itself is brief so that we can get through as many as possible.
Hi, Geeta, thank you so much. Quick question.
Yeah.
You're a small startup and you have a big company approaching you.
Yeah.
How do you know if they are the right fit, or like you think you can deliver and you really need this to catapult your business but you're not sure?
Yeah.
So what would your take on that? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I'll explain a little bit further, what actually broke down in this relationship, because obviously this startup was capable, but something had broken, and I have to admit, a bit of it was on our side too. Ultimately, what we asked them to do was out of their scope. They were an augmented reality company. They could augment static images, but what I asked them to do was navigate with a phone camera a very complex shelf, identify very, very, very tiny packages with very, very, very small font with nuances, identify the groupings, and then augment. And what I learned in a very honest conversation was they really weren't able to do those first 4 steps. They were an augmented reality company. So in fact, they were doing what they were good at. I had asked them to do something that was a little out of their scope. But both of us were accountable to talking about that. I didn't know it was out of their scope. So what I would say is, as I've worked with startups now, is be really honest, but ask a lot of questions. So rather than being really eager, which obviously, I get it, the startup they wanted to work with us. Rather than saying, this is what we do, and this is how we can do it, and this is how much money it's going to save you, say, what do you truly want to solve for? Who are the decision makers on your end? What do we do if we don't meet expectations? Should we set up milestone meetings so we're all on the same page maybe every month? It's almost like, as much as we manage you, you also have to manage us. Because that's really what relationship management is. It's sort of managing each other's expectations. So that's what I would say. It's sort of like really ask questions that force us to answer. Because if that had happened, I would have said, well, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is exactly what I'd like you to complete. And maybe the startup would have been, well, that's cool. We can definitely come in at the end, but we can't do their first 4 steps. But maybe we can find a startup that can through our network. Something like that. Yeah. Do I choose? Oh. Do I? Oh, sorry. I was like, who's next? I'm going to pick this girl.
I just have to know, what is the project management tool you're using?
Oh, it's called Asana. It's probably well known. Yeah. I don't know if it's the best, but I used it, and it was really awesome. And in fact, if anybody wants to go see my fuck up in detail, they can. Because there is a timeline with very clear deliverables that were missed and why. Yes?
I know that it was very difficult for you probably to deliver the bad news to your boss.
Yes.
So how did that conversation start, and what do you think you can learn from it, and how go about approaching it?
What I think is rewarded a lot in really good companies, and this company, is telling you what's happening, not asking you if it's okay that it happens. So I took leadership, and I had all of the senior leaders in a room. I had the data, and I said, so I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. This didn't work out. Here's why. I'm choosing to fire them, and I promise that we will learn from this. I will share out the learnings, and hopefully we can have another great successful project. What's so interesting about telling people in corporate what's happening? It removes the burden, and it removes the stress and the fear. Because if I had said, I'm not really sure what to do, but I really like this startup, but I don't know if I should fire them, I'm not sure, everyone would have panicked. And it would have appeared as a failure, but in fact it appeared as an intentional decision. And that is really what all business needs to move forward, right? Just make a decision. Just do it. Don't lose us any more money, and move forward.
Hi. So,
Hello.
as a innovation leader,
Yes.
what advice would you give to other leaders to create a culture where people can experiment without without being judged unfairly?
Excellent question, Chris. I know him. I didn't know he'd ask that question though. That's such a good question. A culture of innovation is actually one of my goals. I think ultimately any innovation manager doesn't want to operate in a silo. In fact, wants to shout from the rooftops what they're doing. I sort of operate with a loud and proud model. That board that you saw, that Kanban, was on display for everybody to see. I almost wish people would ask me, what are you working on, and what's happening, and why? So what I'd say is to create a culture of innovation, you really have to create safety. And I think so many big companies say that they're okay with failure, but I wouldn't say they all are. So what I think I would do, and what I have done, is I invite the outside world in. I think it's very daunting to ask people who work for large companies, go out, find ideas, go find cool things to do and cool people to partner with and the next big thing for our business. No, why not use our own space as a living museum of all these cool things that are being done and bring them in so people can touch them and feel them and experience them. And then there's less pressure, there's less fear, they can ask questions in real time. So I have held 4 showcases in my company where I have invited all of the startups that I'm working with in. And I've asked them to present what they do to everybody, so the entire organization, and I set up booths like a science fair. And I say there's no dumb question, they're here because they're partners, and you can ask, what's Bitcoin? What is that? Or, what's the future of e-com? Or how big is Amazon? Or what's Alibaba? You can ask anything because I've invited them in to share their knowledge. So I'd say that, sort of bringing the outside world in to create a culture of inclusivity and of safety, and ultimately really following through with what you say. And if it is to reward failure, then do it. I mean, ultimately, you saw there were 2 choices that my manager could have made, but he made the one that reinforced what the culture really says, which is it is an inclusive culture that allows failure.